Hello and welcome, it's our Confessions podcast, another audio array of terrible tales from the discerning but sinful Radio 2 listener. This week's concise collection includes a slimy slipping scene, though I have to say it's actually a vicar with a chainsaw, which is, probably more exciting. A mischievous money mishap, which involves pants, and a frantic, famous frolic. There's only three, because we only did three, because I was away on Monday. Thank you very much. Who will you forgive? Here it all comes. This is Radio 2. Here we've got a confession here. It's another drive-time confession. Keep them coming, please. Simon Mayo, bbc.co.uk, or confessions at bbc.co.uk. They all come to the same place in the end, i.e. me. Or you can go via the website and send in your confession. There's a nice little form that you can fill in. Don't forget the podcast. That's there in case you miss any. If you go to the Radio 2 website, you can download it from there. Hey, this is from Les, by the way. Les sends in tonight's tale. Dear Father Simon and the Creative and Carefree Collective.
That's us.
Gather round. We moved to our current address in 1995 and up until 3 years ago had always had a problem with the next-door neighbour's overgrown apple and holly trees. I think next-door neighbour confessions are always good. They had not been looked after for over 25 years. It was a long time, and were taking over all of our outdoor space. When we asked if we could cut them back just a little, the old lady who lived there refused to let us touch them, as her husband had planted them, and she wanted them to be a memory to him as he had died many years ago. We put up with the inconvenience of the trees blocking the light from our garden, nothing growing, not being able to enjoy our space for 15 years, always biting the bottom lip in despair, and always saying that if the old lady moved on, the first thing would be to seek permission from the new owners to remove the trees. Well, while we were away on holiday, the old lady sadly passed away, and her niece became the sole benefactor of the will and inherited the house. At the funeral, we were told that she was selling it. This was my chance. I inquired about the trees. Please cut them down. She told me, you would be doing me a big favour. No one would buy the house with the trees in that state. She also added jokingly that her old auntie would probably haunt us if we did take them down, which circumstances wasn't the most helpful thing, really, to mention. My neighbour, who lived on the other side of the old lady's house, had also had enough of the trees, as they were protruding into his wall foundations, so he decided to start cutting them down from his side. But a large crack was heard, and a branch hit him on the back of his head, causing him to lie down for a considerable period of time. Not a major catastrophe, then. I made my start on the tree. I climbed up a few feet, but sad to report, another large crack was heard as I misjudged the strength of the wood, falling out of the tree, landing on a brick wall and hurting 3 ribs. Were the trees really haunted?
No.
Hello. Or was it just a coincidence that both my neighbour and myself got injured attempting to take the trees down?
No.
No, it was.
It was,
sorry,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was, yeah.
A couple of days later, I was attending a christening and was talking to the vicar about the trees which bordered our garden. He said that as he had a wood-burning fire and a chainsaw...
Who's this vicar?
It's a vicar with a chainsaw. Instantly, I got to that sentence, I thought, right, this is in. He said as he wood-burning fire and a chainsaw, perhaps he could help to take the trees down in return for the wood, and maybe say a few exorcist-type prayers along the way. We agreed, and along he came with a chainsaw, and off went the vicar chopping for all he was worth. Now, please bear in mind that the garden next door had not been touched for 25 years, and also that I haven't told you one other thing about one of the garden's features. I mention it now, as this was when I realised that I hadn't told the vicar either. The garden also contained a garden pool. Lovely though it had been in its day, it was now all but invisible, as it had grown over with algae, which looked exactly like grass.
Oh, no.
As the vicar chopped away, he stood back to get a better position.
No.
1 step was fine. 2 steps, he's on the cusp. 3rd step... Sort of splash that a vicar with a chainsaw makes, as he became submerged in the vile, toxic-smelling gloop of a once ornamental garden pool, with his hand sticking out of the water, holding the chainsaw like Excalibur. A splendid image, Les. Like that one. I jumped over and took the chainsaw and then dragged the vicar to safety on the edge of the pool. And unfortunately, he was so disorientated, he now fell back in again, this time face first. I again dragged him out. He now resembled something from the Black Lagoon and smelt like it as well. Before I knew what was going on, the vicar stripped completely in the garden, looking for some way to escape the stench. So not only had the vicar gone in the pool twice...
This is very carry-on, isn't it?
But he was now naked in the garden and uttering a whole bunch of unreverential words.
Oh, yes.
The vicar with a chainsaw with no clothes on.
And now going a bit blue. Excellent.
The vicar had become the third casualty. No one was seriously hurt, and the pool has now been filled in, and looks like the curse maybe has gone due to the vicar's baptism and exorcism all happening at the same time. But ask forgiveness from the vicar for not telling him about the pool, and forgiveness from the old lady for cutting the trees down, even if she seems to have had the last laugh from beyond the grave. Anyway, it's got a vicar in a chainsaw. It's an unbeatable story. And a vicar who takes his clothes off with the chainsaw is absolutely irresistible. Thank you, Les. Let's see what Sister Rebecca makes
that
of this.
strikes me as, I mean, that could have been really dangerous, because if you fall into a pool of water with a chainsaw that's plugged in,
Well,
right,
I imagine
you could
it's
actually
oil.
die.
No, it's oil. It'll be fine
Really?
with the
You think
battery
so?
or oil fire.
You think there
yeah.
wasn't any danger
plugged in.
of mortality?
No, none at all.
Okay, well, I think, well, that
Oil
was... But
fired.
still, that was... Les, you really should have told the vicar
Well,
about the
he
pool.
just forgot.
He forgot. So I guess, yeah, I can't blame you. You forgot. It wasn't... Yeah, it was a mistake.
Yes.
And you probably felt really bad about it. And actually, good on you for holding off chopping down those trees while the old lady was still alive,
I think that's a
or
good
really
point.
trying to persuade her to do it, and you put up with it for 15 years. So I think, yeah, you're forgiven.
Well, let's see what Brother Matthew
What I
makes of it.
love about this is at no point does anyone say, when we want to get rid of this tree, what should we get a lumberjack in, or a tree surgeon, or whoever is properly qualified to bring down? No, I know a vicar who's got his own chainsaw. Brilliant. Well, that's sorted. Absolutely.
Well, he's a vicar, so
Let's
he might be
bring
able
in
to
the vicar.
exorcise
Yes, apparently
the tree.
exercising the tree. He wasn't exercising the tree.
He tried-
But, however, if you're looking for a template to how to get your confession read out on air, here is the... If you've got a vicar who ends up stripping off and swearing and with a chainsaw, boom, you're getting on the air. Well done. And for that, I'm going to forgive.
Here's tonight's confession. Matt's passing a note with the right answer on. Very good. See me afterwards. Tonight's confession comes from Jez. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's tale. You can send yours, confessions at bbc.co.uk, and the Confessions podcast available at the end of each and every week. You never have to miss one. Hearing your recent confession, Simon, regarding a student vomiting at a James concert, which was a particularly fine one, I think.
That was very good.
Which, and in case you missed it, then everyone had to sit down at the end.
Yeah.
And that's what they sat in. And there was a fight. And so I recalled an event long forgotten, but for which I now seek forgiveness. It was 1987 at a large northern red brick university, and I was there studying computer science, or astrospatial engineering, as we called it, when asked by girls at parties, in an attempt to merely postpone the inevitable disappointed "oh" and swift departure by the other person when the truth finally revealed itself. So remember that. That's what you're studying. Astrospatial engineering. Fortunately managed to know a good diverse group of students through other friends and friends of friends. A large group of us used to go out on a regular Saturday night pub crawl around the city. We'd all meet up and start off at the Student Union bar, and then we'd have a hearth in each pub and use beer mats as a count of how many pubs we visited by the end of the night. After a few months, various patterns emerged with regards to some people's behaviour. Frank was generally first to the bar to buy a round, good bloke, an enthusiastic drinker. Stan was usually first to go to the loo, or break the seal, as it was known. Dave never managed to make it to the end, bit of a lightweight. And Patrick always needed a kebab before 10 o'clock. He was the bloke with the greasiest lips in town. And then there was Jack. Jack was a quiet chap. He was on my course, so I got to know him quite well. He was very careful with his money, shall we say, and the Saturday night pub crawl was the only night that he went out, and he often managed to avoid buying any rounds at all. This went unnoticed for a while, but eventually the only times we spotted Jack at the bar, he was buying himself a drink. Only himself. And he did it away from the rest of us, in the hope that we wouldn't see. We'd poke fun at Jack, asking why he never bought rounds, and he always claimed to be permanently skint, saying his family wasn't well off and his grant barely covered his living expenses. A grant, for younger listeners, is when is when the government paid you to have some higher education.
Sounds unbelievable, doesn't it?
We're going down an avenue now.
Imagine that.
Here we go.
barely covered his living expenses, and he had to live off beans on toast and Angel Delight, yada, yada, yada. He couldn't get an evening or weekend job, he said, because he had to study to keep up with the coursework. A likely story, but we felt sorry for him and continued to subsidise his Saturday evening out. Then one Saturday, we met as usual in the Student Union bar, and our first half passed with a bag of Golden Wonder prawn cocktail crisps, and we failed miserably to chat up any girls. So that's an exciting night by anyone's standards. As we walked out into the balmy June night air, Jack said that he had to go to the cash point to take out some money for the evening, and he'd catch us up at the next pub. Now, given his tendency for financial frugality, this caught us by surprise, and I was keen to find out quite how much money he actually had in his account. The cash point was on the side of a well-known student-friendly bank just next to the Student Union building. Jack joined the queue of dishevelled-looking students all waiting to withdraw their weekend fiver. As the rest of us rounded the corner, we stopped, and I peered round to see when Jack would actually get to the cash point. As each student in the queue quietly withdrew their fiver, Jack edged closer and closer till eventually he was there. He inserted his card and keyed in his PIN number. I took my chance, sprinted round the corner towards him. Jack turned towards me as I approached. He backed against the cash point. I wasn't going to be able to see his balance on the screen, but I just managed to jab an arm past him, and I pushed a button on the cash point machine, and it beeped. He turned round to stare at the screen, and there was a look of horror on his face. I'd pressed one of the withdraw amount buttons. It was the one marked £200.
Oh, yes.
Unbelievably, the machine started whirring, counting out the notes ready for dispensing out of the little drawer. This whirring went on for quite a while. The drawer opened and 40 £5 notes were shoved out. Being a cash point next to a student union in the 80s, the bank obviously realised that fivers were the only denomination that students would ever withdraw, and so didn't bother with any larger notes. It was 8 p.m. The bank was shut, and Jack was standing there with 200 quid in used fivers. He panicked and did what probably any socially awkward student with 200 quid in his hand, surrounded by more and more curious onlookers, would do. He shoved the wad down his pants.
What?
Yes, he shoved them down his Y-fronts. Well, after all, we weren't going to let him go back to his student accommodation. It wouldn't be safe, we told him. Safety in numbers will protect you. So we surrounded him like a crack security team, albeit a little scruffy and bedraggled security team, and ushered him to the first pub. Then we did what any well-meaning group of mates would do. We presented him at the bar and made him buy the first round. This he did grudgingly, and thus began a most enjoyable pub crawl. So, I seek forgiveness from Jack for the stress caused by carrying a load of cash around all night in some very dodgy pubs, and also finally admitting that he did have some money after all and wasn't skint. For the embarrassment of being known from then on as someone who carried his cash around in his Y-fronts, although it did prove a useful opener at parties. But most of all, I seek forgiveness from the bar staff in the various pubs during the night, who had to witness Jack furtively furtling around in his Y-fronts, trying not to look suspicious, and then handing over a few damp, crumpled fivers to pay for the drinks. I fall upon your mercy. Love, Jez. P.S. Jack now works at a large bank, but hopefully doesn't carry cash around in his pants anymore. Jez knew that was going to get read out. Well, it was an interesting tale, and I don't think we've had a cash point confession. I don't think there's been a cash point confession ever before. And I think that was quite an interesting tale. £200, no harm done. What do you think there, Sister Rebecca?
I think the fact that the word fertling was in there means that I'm probably going to forgive. But God, it was such a good confession. I love the trip down memory lane with the starting drinking at the Student Union, ending up at the kebab
and just take
store.
Just a fiver.
The Golden Wonder prawn cocktail crisps. It had everything, didn't it? The fiver coming out of the cash point for the weekend. Just perfect. I think it was, pretty outrageous of Jez to push his way, elbow his way past Jack at the cash point machine and try and see his balance, really. And I wasn't going to forgive, but then when it emerged that Jack actually did have lots of money, that's where I've decided to change my mind. So, you're completely forgiven, Jez.
OK, here's his brother Matthew.
Hiding fivers down your pants is the kind of story that's going to stay with you for life, really, isn't it? No one's ever going to forget. It doesn't really matter what Jack does with his life. He could be next man on the moon. Doesn't matter.
Are you getting this round, Jack? Oh, you've got some in your wallet this time.
Yes. And also, it's a great, as he's used it as an opener at parties with girls, I'm sure that's far more effective than saying that you work in astrospatial engineering or whatever that was.
Yeah.
I'd say definitely the ladies will go for that. So I am going to forgive because Jack came out of it very well and has got a few decent stories to tell.
Now it's 16 minutes to 6. We're a little bit on the tardy side. But anyway, look, we've got a great tailor. We've got Novice Nige in the house as well. Some food coming up later.
Evening.
With his pea and crab and chorizo.
That's it.
Sausage.
I'm not even coming in now.
Chorizo.
Yeah, there you go.
Callum sends in tonight's tale. Here's another drive time confession for you. By the way, the Confessions podcast, very good, very smart, very downloadable. Should be around for you tomorrow. Dear Father Simon and the Holy Order, I would like to confess to a childish act I carried out some years ago in Glasgow and to seek forgiveness from all concerned. Whilst I thought it was hilariously funny at the time, I realise now it caused a bit of alarm to a famous person who was on a visit to Glasgow. Our tale begins on a Friday night back in 2004. Beautiful evening. I was at a loose end, but very much cash-strapped, so I couldn't go out drinking in a beer garden like the rest of my mates. As I was trying to think of something to do, my phone rang, and it was my mate Big J, who wondered if I fancied a trip to the cinema. He had won free tickets to a screening of a film called The Chronicles of Riddick, starring Vin Diesel and Judi Dench, and couldn't find anyone else to join him in seeing this film. To be honest, I thought it looked utter rubbish, but because I had nothing else to do and it was free, I accepted his offer. Besides, how often do you get to see a movie with Vin Diesel and Oscar winner Dame Judi Dench? So Big J and I got to the cinema around 7, and the queue was massive. It stretched out around the front door, all the way down the street and past the entrance to the comedy club next door. As we slowly made our way through the queue and arrived at the cinema, they were just at the bit by the cinema fire exit, which was next to the club, and we noticed the fire doors suddenly open and 2 cinema staff looking officious, wearing walkie-talkies around their necks. With that, a BMW 4x4 with blacked-out windows shot around the corner and drew up next to the fire doors. 2 rather burly minders in black suits jumped out, pushed a gap through the crowd so as to get to the fire exit, and ushered out what appeared to be a famous person and a young lady. I didn't recognise this person until Big J shouted, "It's Peter Andre, look!"
Oh, no.
Well, this triggered a whole crowd of girls screaming, "Oh, it's Peter Andre!" Whilst boys started screaming comments that, quite frankly, are unrepeatable on family shows such as Drive Time. I'm not even sure it was Peter Andre, but the crowd were clearly convinced. Whoever he was, he ignored the crowd, quickly rushed in the door with his missus. The door slammed shut, and my chance to get a better look was gone. After we left the cinema and made our way back to the car, Big J and I discussed the evening events. Was The Chronicles of Riddick the worst movie we'd ever seen? Question 2, was it indeed Peter Andre that had been entering the cinema earlier? And question 3, what film had he gone to see? Anyway, as we discussed this, the very same 4x4 shot around the corner and drew to a halt outside the fire exit. This could only mean one thing. Peter Andre was about to leave the building. In a fit of childishness, I suggested that we should play some kind of prank on Peter as he left the cinema. For the record, I have absolutely nothing against Peter Andre, as he comes across as a very nice bloke on television, but opportunities to wind up celebrities don't come very often to a guy like me, so I grasped this one with both hands. We returned to my car, parked on the opposite side of the road to the 4x4, and we waited. When he emerged, we shouted together, "Oh my goodness, it's that famous Australian Jason Donovan, everybody!" Well, the look on Peter Andre's face was priceless. Or so we thought. With hindsight, it probably wasn't as funny as I thought it was. He looked angry and flustered. To be recognised is good. To be wrongly recognised is a very bad thing. The minder driving the 4x4 looked somewhat concerned at the 2 dodgy-looking guys sitting opposite him in a Fiat Punto. His mood wasn't helped when Big J looked back at him, smiled and gave him the thumbs up. Figuring us to be a pair of nutters, he spoke into his walkie-talkie and raced off. We tried to pursue him, but unfortunately, the Fiat Punto isn't built for dramatic U-turns. So by the time we got over to the right side of the road and down the alley, the 4x4 was gone. Oh, well, we'd had a bit of excitement. We'd added it to an otherwise dull evening with a rubbish movie. Whilst the film had been complete, we'd rather been in a pub, frankly, with our mates, and we had been involved in a brief car chase through Glasgow with a celebrity, and not many people could say that. Big J lived at the time, you might like to know, at a flat behind a luxurious Glasgow hotel, and I offered to drop him home. It seemed our big adventure was not complete. As we pulled into the alleyway between Big J's flat and the hotel, the very same 4x4 came in at the other end of the alleyway and stopped in front of us. We had accidentally shown up at the very place Peter Andre was staying. The driver of the car recognised us and in a panic slammed the car into a reverse, whilst the minder in the back of the car forced Andre and his lady friend's head down where they couldn't be seen. We realised now that we'd alarmed a major celebrity into thinking there was a major incident taking place. We did what anyone else would do. we sped off. To this day, I still feel slightly bad that a minor prank upset an innocent man. So I would ask forgiveness from Peter Andre, at least I think it was him, I'm still not sure. It could have been Linus Roach, who was actually in the movie, and he might have turned up. Anyway, also apologies from his minders, who probably thought they had a quiet night ahead of them and instead ended up fleeing 2 potential stalkers in a Fiat Punto. And most of all, forgiveness from the mysterious girl. You remember that was a Peter Andre hit.
I see. Well
but
done.
there was a mysterious girl with him. This girl wasn't Jordan, and I never saw her in the press with him after that. So it could have been anyone, frankly. And I don't read Hello magazine, as you might have realised. Says Callum, who basically... I like the idea of the prank. You see Peter Andre coming out the cinema, you shout, "Look, it's Jason Donovan," and he gets very annoyed. I think that's quite funny. What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
I think that must happen to celebrities all the time, being mistaken for somebody else, don't you think?
Well, the only thing they have in common is that they both sing and are Australian, but they don't really look the same.
I know, but there are
they?
lots of people who kind of go, "I recognise that person, I just can't remember who they are," and they might just shout out any old name. So I think the over-the-top behaviour actually came from the celebrities' minders. I mean... You know, what about shoving their heads down at the back of the car to hide them as if they're about to be kidnapped or something? And it probably wasn't Peter Andre anyway. So I think for all those reasons, Callum, you're forgiven.
Did I mention the woman in the car wash who thought I was Christopher Walken?
There you go. You see, it happens all the time.
Really?
Who else
What?
have you been mistaken for? A few over the years.
Brad Pitt.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah, good. No, good.
Okay, just keep the mouth slightly restrained. Brother Matt.
Maybe help me. here, Matt.
Here's the thing with the going to the movies if you're a celebrity and wanting to use the fire doors and get your 4x4 to draw up. If that's going to happen, then frankly you deserve everything you're going to get. And I am going to wager that those bodyguards love this kind of stuff. As soon as they saw that Fiat Punto down the alley, oh great, we can do all of our fancy driving and training. Everyone get down in the back. Ooh, big eagles down. No one's convinced by that, so I am going to forgive.
Big eagles down.
Yeah, that's what they all whisper into the cuffs and, big eagles down, hit the deck.
Is that what Peter
I've got
Andre's known
this.
as?
Yes.
Look out, it's Big Eagle.
Yes, his code name.
I
Big
saw that
Eagle.
film with Clint
Yeah.
Eastwood. Yeah, Big Eagle's down. He's coming back up again. He's going down again.
Novice Nige.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, blacked out 4x4s. Oh, dear. Racing up to a cinema. They deserved all this stuff. And then to forcing the poor mysterious girl down below, out of sight, and then back up again and off again. I mean, she was poor thing, didn't know what was happening to her. Absolutely, Callum and Big J forgiven. And I hope your Fiat Punto is, that sounds like a proper car chase car.
They were this week's confessions. Who did you forgive? And send in your own. We could do with some summer confessions, I think, which we can run in August. Confessions at bbc.co.uk. Confessions will be taking a rest just for a couple of weeks, as I'm taking a rest for a couple of weeks. But it'll be back. Download the Weekly Mayo in the meantime.